My parents left me when I was 17, and when I got rich, I bought their house and destroyed it to the ground. I was 17 years old when my parents abandoned me at a gas station. Now, nearly 2 decades later, they came back, begging for help. I bought their house. And I tore it down. My name is Daniel, and this is my story. I'm Daniel Carter, 35 years old, and I run a successful construction company. My life is stable now, but I still remember that scorching summer day, the sharp smell of gasoline, the heat pressing against my skin, the sound of my parents' car engine leaving me behind. Even after all these years, I can still feel the weight of that moment, like a scar burned into my memory. Before I continue, I need to warn you, this is going to be a long one. My parents, let's call them Richard and Diane, believed in something they called tough love. But it wasn't really about teaching me anything. It was just an excuse to be cruel. Every mistake I made, big or small, was treated like some life-altering catastrophe. They made every situation miserable just to teach me a lesson. Forgot to take out the trash. I wouldn't be allowed to eat dinner. Left a light on. I had to mow the lawn at 3 a.m. as punishment. Missed the bus? Too bad. Walked to school. Even if it was raining, snowing, or freezing outside. We weren't poor. Not by a long shot. But my parents loved to act like every penny they spent on me was a huge burden. I started working as soon as I could, lifeguarding at the local pool when I was 15, just so I could have a little money they couldn't take from me. That job became my escape, my tiny piece of independence in a house that never felt like home. But no job could have prepared me for that day. That summer, we were driving back from visiting my older brother Ethan at college, about 4 hours away. I was in the back seat, half asleep, listening to my iPod. Yeah, I know, that probably makes me sound ancient. Dad pulled off the highway to refuel. Some tiny gas station in the middle of nowhere. Danny, go get me a coffee, Dad grumbled from the front seat, tossing a few crumpled bills at me. I sighed but didn't argue. There was no point. I grabbed the money and dragged myself inside. The place smelled like burnt coffee, cigarettes, and motor oil. The guy behind the counter looked like he hadn't moved from that stool in decades. The coffee machine was broken, so I had to wait while he made a fresh pot. It took maybe 5 minutes. When I stepped back outside, the car was gone. At first, I thought they'd just moved to another pump. Then I saw our silver sedan pulling onto the highway. I froze, standing there with a steaming cup of coffee in my hand, watching my parents drive away. For a few seconds, I still thought, this has to be a mistake. Maybe they didn't see me come out. Maybe Dad was just messing around and would pull back into the lot. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Mom. Let's see how long it takes you to get home. Consider this a lesson in problem solving. I tried calling, straight to voicemail. Called again. Same thing. 20 minutes passed. My phone buzzed again. Don't bother calling. Your father says you need to figure this out yourself. See you when you make it home. I wasn't even surprised. This wasn't even the worst thing they'd done. 2 years earlier, when I was 15, they locked me out of the house in the middle of winter because I got a C+ in chemistry. Maybe a night in the cold will teach you responsibility, Dad had said. I ended up breaking into the garage and sleeping there. The next morning, they were furious, not because they felt bad, but because I'd broken a window getting inside. They made me pay for it with my lifeguarding money. So standing there in that gas station parking lot, watching my parents' car disappear into the distance, something inside me just snapped. Or maybe it broke. I looked at the coffee in my hand, still steaming, and felt something I hadn't felt before. Freedom. I had about $160 in my wallet. My backpack, with my clothes, phone charger, and everything else I owned, was in the car. But it didn't matter. I wasn't going back. I turned around and walked back into the gas station. The guy behind the counter barely looked up. Hey, I said, my voice steady. Where's the nearest bus station? He squinted at me, then pointed down the road. About 2 miles that way. Thanks, I said. You okay, kid? He asked, frowning. Yeah, I said. Just need to make a call first. I pulled out my phone and called Aunt Laura, Mom's younger sister. She picked up on the second ring. Danny? What's wrong? I took a deep breath. They left me. Wait, what? Who? Mom and Dad. At a gas station. They just left. There was a long silence on the other end. Then Aunt Laura said something I'll never forget. Stay put. I'm coming for you. Laura lived 4 states away, but she didn't hesitate. She called me an Uber, well, technically a local taxi service, since Uber wasn't even a thing yet, to the bus station. Then she bought me a ticket online. Get yourself here, she told me. We'll figure the rest out when you arrive. While I waited for the cab, my phone kept buzzing with texts from Mom. Don't you dare call Laura. You better be walking home, young man. Your father is very disappointed. This attitude of yours needs to stop. I didn't even reply. I blocked their numbers. Then I turned off my phone. I got on the bus and watched the landscape blur past the window for 6 straight hours. I didn't cry. I didn't feel scared. I just felt relieved. For the first time in my life, I was done. Done with their games. Done with their punishments. Done with them. I never went back. And I never spoke to them again. Until 20 years later, when they came looking for me, begging for help. But by then, I was no longer the kid they abandoned. And they had no idea what was coming next. For almost 20 years, I had no contact with them. No phone calls. No emails. No messages. Nothing. And I liked it that way. Aunt Laura took me in. She helped me finish high school, get my GED, and, unlike my parents, actually supported me when I wanted to study construction management. I worked my way up in the industry, learning everything from laying foundations to managing multi-million-dollar projects. By the time I was 30, I had my own business. Construction. We specialized in sustainable housing, and we were damn good at it. I got married to an incredible woman, Sarah. We had twin boys, Logan and Eli, who just turned 8. Life was good. No, scratch that. Life was great. And then one day, my past came knocking. The call. It started with 39 missed calls. I had been in a business meeting when my office phone lit up like a Christmas tree. Most of the numbers were unfamiliar, but 3 calls were from my sister, Emily. Emily and I had never been particularly close. She was only 8 years old when I left, but she was the only family member who hadn't actively been cruel to me. I hesitated for a moment, then played the first voicemail. Danny, please pick up. Her voice was shaking. Mom and Dad found you. They're spiraling. Just, call me back, okay? Not them. Me. I clenched my jaw and played the next message. Most were from Richard and Diane, my parents. The same people who had dumped their teenage son at a gas station like he was an unwanted piece of luggage. Now they were calling me, begging. Your mother is sick. She wasn't. How dare you abandon your family? Funny, coming from them. We made one mistake. One? Try a lifetime of them. And then there was the last voicemail. It was my father. He sounded drunk. You think you're better than us with your fancy business? We made you who you are. You owe us. Owe them? I let out a hollow laugh, shaking my head. The irony of that statement was almost comedic. I spent the next hour just staring at my phone, watching it light up over and over again. My foreman, Mark, even poked his head into my office at one point. You okay, boss? I must have looked like I'd seen a ghost. Finally, I took a deep breath and texted Emily. Meeting. Tomorrow. Denny's on 6th, 7 a.m. Come alone or don't come. The next morning, I walked into Denny's at exactly 7 a.m. Emily was already there. She looked exactly like I remembered, just older. Same dark hair, same nervous habit of shredding napkins into tiny pieces while she talked. She didn't waste any time. They're losing the house, she blurted out before even sitting down. I didn't react. Just stirred my coffee. Dad's been gambling. Mom's maxed out their credit cards. They found your company website, saw your success, and now. She sighed, rubbing her temples. Now they want money. Of course they did. How much? I asked. $50,000. To avoid foreclosure. I took a slow sip of my coffee. They think you owe them, Emily continued, staring down at the shredded napkin in front of her. Dad says it's because all those teaching moments made you tough. That your success is thanks to them. I let out a short, bitter laugh. Let me get this straight, I said. The same people who abandoned me at a gas station, who kicked me out for getting a C+, who treated me like a burden, now think they're entitled to my success. Emily bit her lip. They're still our parents, she whispered. No, I said firmly. They stopped being my parents 20 years ago. The difference between you and me, Emily? You're still hoping they'll change. My phone buzzed. Mom. Again. I declined the call and reached for my wallet. I'm paying for breakfast. After this, block my number. I slid a few bills onto the table. Whatever they do next, don't call me. Emily reached for my arm. Danny, please. I mean it. I met her gaze. You're my sister, and I love you. But I am not your solution. Let them fall. I was halfway to my truck when Emily ran after me. They're coming to your office, she called out. Tomorrow morning. Mom found the address. I tried to stop them, I swear. I just nodded. Good, I said. Let them come. By the time I got back to my office, I had 27 new messages. They were calling everyone, distant relatives, old family friends, trying to paint me as the heartless son who had abandoned his poor, helpless parents. Classic. But here's what they didn't know, I had been making calls of my own. I did some digging. Turns out their mortgage was owned by a bank I had connections with. They weren't just behind on payments. Foreclosure had already started. By the time my parents walked into my office the next morning, thinking they could guilt-trip or manipulate me, they were already screwed. Because I had just bought their mortgage. Legally. They thought they had leverage. They thought they could force me to be their retirement plan. They had no idea what was coming. The next morning, I sat in my office, calmly drinking my coffee. I had everything prepared. The mortgage transfer was finalized. My lawyer had reviewed the paperwork. My security team was on standby. And now, I was just waiting. At exactly 9:15 a.m., my receptionist, Julia, buzzed in. Daniel, there's a couple here insisting on seeing you, she said hesitantly. They say they're your parents. My stomach tightened, but my voice stayed calm. Send them up. Through the glass walls of my office, I watched Richard and Diane walk in. They looked smaller than I remembered. My father's once dark hair was almost entirely gray, and he had a permanent scowl etched into his face. My mother's blonde dye job wasn't fooling anyone, deep wrinkles lined her forehead, and her expensive-looking dress couldn't hide the fact that she looked tired. As soon as they spotted me, Mom's face crumpled. Danny, she sobbed, rushing toward me with her arms outstretched. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I just raised a hand. Let's keep this professional, I said, gesturing to the chairs. Take a seat. She stopped in her tracks, sniffling dramatically, then collapsed into a chair. Dad, on the other hand, didn't sit. Instead, he puffed out his chest and crossed his arms. Now, son, he started, his voice dripping with forced authority, is that any way to speak to your own mother? I didn't even blink. Cut the crap, I said. You didn't spend the last 20 years looking for me because you missed me. You found me now because you need something. The fake tears disappeared instantly. Mom stiffened. Dad's face turned a deep shade of red. How can you be so cruel? Mom demanded, her voice shaking. We made one mistake. I laughed. A short, sharp, bitter laugh. One mistake? I repeated, shaking my head. You abandoned your 17-year-old son at a gas station in the middle of nowhere. You drove off laughing, saying let's see how long it takes him to get home. I leaned forward, locking eyes with her. That wasn't a mistake. That was the last straw after years of your sick games. Dad slammed a fist on my desk. We came back for you, he shouted. After an hour, we drove back to that station, but you were gone. Yeah, I said coolly. I was gone. And I stayed gone. Best decision I ever made. I reached into my desk, pulled out my phone, and hit record. Now, I said. State your business, or leave. That's when the truth finally came out. Between Mom's sobbing and Dad's angry grumbling, I pieced together their situation. They had taken out a second mortgage for one of Dad's foolproof investment schemes. Spoiler alert, it wasn't foolproof. Now, they were 6 months behind on payments. The bank was foreclosing. And they needed $175,000 to save the house. You've done so well for yourself, Mom whimpered, gesturing at my office. Surely you can help your own parents. I let them finish. Then I reached into my desk and pulled out a folder. Funny you should mention the house, I said, sliding the folder across the desk. Dad frowned, flipping it open. His face went from confused to horrified in under 5 seconds. What is this? He stammered. Mom leaned over, scanning the papers. It took her a few moments. And then, she gasped. Because she had just read the words. Property transfer. The silence was beautiful. Their faces, priceless. What does this mean? Mom whispered. I leaned back in my chair, completely relaxed. It means, I said, smirking, that your mortgage was recently purchased. By me. Dad's face turned purple. You can't do that, he bellowed. I can, I said simply. And I did. Mom's hands flew to her mouth. But that means. That means you have 30 days to vacate the property, I finished for her. After that, my company will be demolishing it. Mom screamed. Dad lunged across the desk. I didn't even flinch. Security was already there. Within seconds, my guards grabbed him by the arms and dragged him backward. You think you're some big shot now? You think you can just throw your own parents out on the street? I stood up slowly, buttoning my suit jacket. Like the gas station was my home? I said, tilting my head. At least I'm giving you 30 days. You gave me 30 seconds. Dad was foaming at the mouth. Mom was full-on wailing, clawing at her face like some tragic movie character. But I just watched, calm as ever. My phone buzzed. A text from Emily. They just called me crying. What did you do? I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I typed back. What they taught me to do. Look out for myself. After they were dragged out of my building, the calls didn't stop. They tried to rally the family against me. They told everyone their ungrateful son was stealing their home. Too bad for them, I had proof. I mass emailed the entire family. Attached were the old Nokia recording from the gas station, where they laughed as they left me behind. Screenshots of old birthday cards saying things like maybe if you weren't such a disappointment. Text messages from them over the years, full of manipulation and abuse. The family group chat exploded. Some people took their side. But most? They saw the truth. Emily called me later that night. They lied, she whispered. They told everyone you ran away. I laughed. Classic. But that wasn't the best part. The best part? The house, their house, was already scheduled for demolition. And I invited them to watch. They showed up the next morning, thinking my Aunt Laura had convinced me to change my mind. Instead, they got front row seats to watching their precious house get torn down. Mom screamed. Dad threatened to sue. I just sipped my coffee, watching it all crumble, just like they had tried to do to me. But I wasn't just tearing something down. I was building something better. Because that land? I was turning it into affordable housing. 20 units. Reasonable rent. Priority given to single parents and struggling families. And the name of the project? Laura Haven. Named after the woman who saved me when my parents threw me away. I stood there, coffee in hand, as the wrecking ball slammed into the side of the house. The walls crumbled. The roof collapsed inward. The garden, the one my mother used to brag about, the one she claimed was prize-winning, was buried under rubble in seconds. And my parents? They watched it happen. Mom was screaming, this raw, broken wail like she had just lost everything. Dad stood frozen, his hands balled into fists, his face red with rage and humiliation. But I felt nothing. I took a slow sip of my coffee, letting the heat settle in my chest, and watched the last piece of the house collapse into dust. It was over. The next morning, they showed up at my office again. But this time? They looked different. Mom's usual dramatics were gone. There were no fake tears, no loud demands. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept in days. Dad's usual arrogance was missing, too. His hands shook as he sat down, rubbing his forehead. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Mom's voice broke the silence. "Danny," she whispered, her eyes red-rimmed. "We have nowhere to go." I just watched her. Unblinking. Dad took a shaky breath. "Look," he said. "We screwed up. Okay? But we're still your parents. You can't just throw us out like this." I tilted my head. "Like you threw me out?" They both flinched. Dad clenched his jaw. "That was different. You were a kid. You needed to learn responsibility." I laughed, cold and sharp. "So abandoning me was just a lesson?" I said. "And now that you need help, I'm supposed to forget everything?" Mom leaned forward, gripping the edge of my desk. I forgive you, Danny," she stammered. "I forgive you for this. I know you're hurting, but—" I held up a hand, cutting her off. "You forgive me?" I repeated, my voice deadly calm. Mom froze. Even Dad looked uncomfortable now. I stood up slowly, placed my hands on the desk, and leaned forward. "You left me at a gas station when I was 17, I said quietly. "You laughed as you drove away. And when I made something of myself without you? You came back, not to apologize, not to reconnect, but to ask for money. And now, when I say no, you think you're in a position to forgive me?" Silence. Dad's face was twitching, his fists clenched, his rage barely contained. Mom just looked defeated. Then I pulled a folder from my desk. Dad's eyes darted to it. "What's that?" I slid it toward them. "A rental application," I said. Mom blinked. What?" "A rental application," I repeated. "For one of the new affordable housing units my company is building. You're welcome to apply, just like anyone else." The look on their faces? Absolutely priceless. You can't be serious," Dad sputtered. "I am," I said. "You'll need references and a clean credit check, of course. But hey, if you qualify, you might even get one of the nicer units." Mom started crying again. But it wasn't performative this time. It was real. "Dad?" Dad's hands shook with rage. "After everything we did for you?" I smiled. "After everything you did to me." He shot up from his chair so fast the desk rattled. "You'll regret this," he spat. "Mark my words." I leaned back, still calm. "No, Dad," I said. "I think the only ones regretting anything right now are you." Security came in before things could escalate. They were escorted out. And that was the last time I ever saw them. After that, they burned every bridge they had left. They called every distant relative, every old friend, anyone who would listen, telling them how their ungrateful son had stolen their house and thrown them onto the street. But the difference this time? I had proof. I had the recordings of them leaving me at the gas station. I had the text messages of their emotional abuse. I had the birthday cards with backhanded insults. So when they tried to turn the family against me, I sent out a mass email. Every single relative got to hear the recordings. See the texts. Read the old birthday cards. By the end of the day, my phone was flooded with messages. Not from my parents. But from family members saying, "Holy SHT. We had no idea. I'm so sorry we ever believed them. They've been lying to us for years." Their last lifeline was gone. At first, I thought demolishing their house was my revenge. But I was wrong. The real revenge wasn't tearing their house down. It was what I built in its place. The land they had once owned. It became Laura Haven, named after my aunt, the only real parent I ever had. It's now affordable housing, 20 units, reasonably priced, designed for single parents and struggling families. Families who needed a second chance. Families like me. My parents? They ended up in a cheap motel outside of town, still waiting for some miracle that would never come. Emily called me once, saying they were threatening to sue me. I laughed. "With what money, Em?" She sighed. Yeah. That's what I told them. A few weeks later, I got a text from her. They left town. No idea where they went. Guess they finally gave up. I never saw them again. And I don't care. Because the truth is, some people don't deserve forgiveness. Some bridges deserve to stay burned. These days, I don't think about them much. I think about my wife, Sarah. I think about my kids, Logan and Eli. I think about the life I built, the one I fought so hard for. And when I drive past Laura Haven, I smile. Because that is my legacy. Not them. Never them. Thank you for watching the video. Like it if you watched the video to the end and don't forget to subscribe. Have a nice day.